My name is John Santaferraro, and this is The Digital Analyst, where AI makes sense and digital dominance begins.
The Digital Analyst with John Santaferraro, powered by Insight Jam.
The way we move and process data has changed radically over the last 40 years, but unfortunately, there are very few who have centralized what we call data engineering. There remains a remnant of far too many tools necessary to manage all kinds of data in all of the different scenarios required by the mix of modern and mature use cases. Messaging platforms still move data from point to point. ETL tools have never been laid in the grave. The data wrangling tools left over from the days of big data have tried to grow up, but few have made the grade. iPaaS platforms designed to integrate internet SaaS platforms have made great strides, but most still lack core data management capabilities. Data streaming platforms hope to do for data at rest what they've already done for data in motion, but a significant gap still exists. Even world-class software development organizations from the most well-known companies in the world still have different platforms for messaging, data transformation, big data processing, streaming data, cloud data, on-premises data, applications, APIs, data pipelines, and now AI pipelines. And in most cases, any pipeline of any kind requires multiple tools. Enter the world of AI, generative AI, and agentic AI. Is it possible that they will be the great unifier of all things data engineering? Great strides have already been made using metadata, both business and technical metadata, to bring together the different data engineering functions in the cloud. In fact, without the active use of a rich set of metadata, AI would not be able to do many of the things it's already doing with data engineering and with intelligence. Generative AI may prove to be the new user interface, giving data engineers and business users alike the option of using plain language to articulate business objectives as the driver behind data pipeline creation. But it is agentic AI that opens the door wide, not just for the creation of data pipelines and the unification of data engineering, but quite possibly for the emergence of autonomous data engineering. We are not far away from the creation of a multi-agent environment where AI agents mimic all of the different roles of data engineering, where they execute all of the functions of the different data engineering platforms and work together under the guidance of a controller agent for all the functions of data engineering. Today's episode of The Digital Analyst addresses just this issue. Is autonomous data engineering finally here? I'm excited to welcome Philip Russom. Philip currently operates as an independent industry analyst, but he's pretty much done it all. He's been a Gartner analyst, a TDWI research analyst, a Forrester principal analyst, and if you remember, a Giga analyst, and before all that, a product manager and a data warehouse consultant. You will enjoy hearing from Philip. So grab a glass of wine or a cup of coffee and join me in my home away from home, just minutes from the beach on the island of Sardinia in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea, for The Digital Analyst. A big digital welcome to Philip Russom. Philip, it's so great to see you. What a privilege to have you here on The Digital Analyst. Welcome.
Well, thank you for having me on, John. I really appreciate that. And it's always good to see you. It was great to see you recently at one of the tech conferences.
Yeah, I was thinking about it. I think you and I have been hanging out together for almost 25 years.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true.
Yeah, so it's like recently and then 100 other events that we've been out together. So this feels like old home week. This is just a chance for you and I to get together and chat specifically about this concept of autonomous data engineering. And and you and I supposedly today we're going to answer this innocuous question: is it really here? Is it here yet? You'd think that it might be, since I started covering autonomous data engineering all the way back in 2018, when leaders in the data engineering field were already automating everything from data profiling to tagging of personally identifiable information. And since that time, automation has exploded with generative AI, the first big wave of innovation, and then agentic AI is hitting now, the second wave. These are exciting times. We're entering a world that is moving, what I would say, beyond automation to autonomy. And my perspective is that autonomous is very different than automation. But let me let you sort of kick it off. From your perspective, what is autonomous data engineering, and what does it take to make it possible, and what has to happen for it to become real?
Yeah, and I think as we go, we're going to need to define a few terms as quickly as we can. And one of the funny aspects here is that there's lots of words that start with the letter A. And, right? Like you've already mentioned autonomy, automation. We're going to talk about agents. We're going to talk about artificial intelligence. So, and these all things they're slightly different things, right? All related, but they key together. And a point I would make is that when it, well, we just kind of set a base level here. I have to remind people a lot of times that software is automation. That's why we have software. And when I was a teenager in college, I had some internships writing accounting. There's another A word. Writing accounting routines for two different petroleum companies. And back then, there was no commercial software to buy. This is in the 70s. And so you had to build your own. So I was working on these projects where we were building software to automate the accounting process. That's a business process. And nowadays, we've got a lot of three-letter acronyms like ERP. Well, that's enterprise software that automates the resource planning function. And CRM is a very big deal. A lot of organizations depend on that software to automate their customer relationship management and so forth. So software is automation at some level, but we would hope that the automation gets better and rises to a new level, and it has. And over the years, there have been a lot of attempts at automation, and many of them happened. They got started before artificial intelligence became a practical reality, the way it is today, right? So I think along the way, I'll touch on some of my favorite stuff like data warehouse automation tools and what kind of automation they have, and it's not AI, it's other stuff. And a lot of people get a little confused and they think AI is really for automation. But if we go back to the origins of AI, it was invented by a bunch of guys in the mid 1950s, right? And the original definition of artificial intelligence they had was to, number one, sort of mimic the way a human brain works. And there were a lot of medical people, neurologists working on this problem, and they developed the neural net, right? So it's funny, a bunch of doctors came up with the neural net. We depend on that for analytics today. But in the beginning, they wanted to build machines that would mimic the way that humans think, and especially the way we apply logic to certain situations. And it wasn't just for automation. It was also so that eventually the machine could be autonomous. The machine could operate by itself. And that was a lofty dream in 1955, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But today, we've worked our way through different phases of automation to really get much closer to autonomy than we've ever been before, right? So that independence of the machine, the ability of the software to be so good that it can actually operate on its own. And something I think we'll come back to is that the level of trust and confidence matters a lot because there are a lot of people like you and I. We have fairly high trust. We know when to trust the machine and when not to. Other people don't trust machines at all, and some people are willing to just turn the machines over and let them run everything. So different people have different levels of trust. a lot of times it's not just the technology, it's also how does the technology fit in human behavior. So does that make sense? In recent years, we've made big strides much closer to autonomy, not just mere automation.
Yeah, and I would say that we're seeing sort of autonomy in pockets. There's certain aspects of engineering that are becoming autonomous because you take data quality, for example. I mean, data quality began its automation journey, I think, all the way back in the late 1990s. People were already looking at, rule-based kinds of automations to work on data quality. So I think we're beginning to see autonomous in pockets. So some of the agents that we're seeing today, for example, can act autonomously to be able to be able to figure out, for example, that a social security number needs to be masked because it is personally identifiable information. Okay, well, that's kind of done. It's like you don't have people sitting around on computers today trying to find social security numbers so they can mask the data. And you don't have a human in the loop that comes in to say, okay, yes, you can mask that. So that is a kind of autonomy. What I'm looking forward to is the day when those task-based autonomous agents begin to act to get more together in unison to be able to do what for example, a data quality specialist would do, or what a data integration specialist would do, or an API integration specialist would do, and really coming alongside of somebody as an assistant or an extension of the work that we do. So I think I agree with you. We've come a long way. We got a ways to go before we get to experience this thing called autonomous engineering. What I'd like to do, Philip, is kind of walk through some of the trends of what we're seeing to figure out how do we get to autonomous data engineering. And one of the starting places for me is just the unification of data engineering. I mean, the cloud definitely made unified data engineering possible. The concept of a metadata warehouse, the companies, you and I know which companies have focused enough on metadata to have a single store of it. And that's foundational for bringing all of the different functions of data engineering together. Between the cloud and the metadata, we are really seeing a lot of different functions of data engineering being unified. And this move has been happening really since around 2018. So from your perspective, what is it that makes unification possible, and what's already being done to unify data engineering?
Well, I agree with you that data engineering has been getting progressively more unified, and everybody's got their own definition of unified, and you and I may have different views here, but that's fine. Together we'll
Absolutely.
just cover the bases more that way.
We're not
That's
here
fine.
to agree. We're here to converse.
Yeah, there you go. So, I mean, there are different ways that data engineering is being unified, and first of all, let's remind people that data engineering is a relatively new term, right? It just showed up about, I don't know, about 2020, 2021, something like that. It's a pretty good term, and data engineers are people who are the specialists, like you alluded to people who are data quality specialists or data integration specialists. A lot of data engineers have those skills. They have that origin story. As a data engineer, you have to develop a long list of skills, really. The data engineer is kind of like the data scientist. You gotta know a long list of stuff and have hands-on capabilities with it. So a data engineer, a single person, may have a lot of quality integration skills. They're also going to have a lot of metadata and other semantic skills, newer types of semantics like the data catalog, things, kind of specialized data management like master data management and customer data management. We could keep going. It's a long list, but data engineers tend to have that. And it kind of depends on your team, right? So a lot of the unification has to do with how unified is the team. So a lot of teams will have different people for those specialties. But I think one of the trends I've seen, and I recommend this strongly, is for individuals to be cross-trained in many data management fields. That makes the best data engineer. Also, if you're a manager and you manage data engineers, if you have people who can come in and pinch hit for practically everything, then you can allocate people more freely uh, 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 when new projects come up and you're staffing those. So there are a lot of reasons why there are a lot of these different data disciplines folded into data engineering. Sometimes the individual data engineer, and so the it's funny, the individual person can be a point of unification. They sort of bring all these skills together in the team, whether you have those multi-discipline people I just described, or you have the specialist. You have to be sure that your staffing spreads across the full gamut of what's required engineering. And so, in a lot of ways, the team sort of unifies a lot of data disciplines that way. Also, more and more, uh, more and more we're seeing data management solutions where one solution, one complex data pipeline or data flow, whatever you want to call it nowadays, that thing is calling multiple disciplines. It'll start by calling an ETL tool to extract data. It'll pass that off to a different tool for data transformation. You mentioned data quality, so it'll call out to data quality tools that have different specialties for data quality from householding to matching and merging. Then data modeling is involved, and so a lot of times one solution structured as a some kind of workflow or data flow, it itself will unify multiple disciplines, multiple tool functions. Well, I mean, I'll just stop there. So that's kind of the way I think of this unification. We have a bunch of disciplines; they have to be brought together somehow.
Unlock better leads through Solutions Review events.
Welcome to Data Demo Day. Expert Roundtable, Solution Spotlight featuring Monte Carlo, Cohesity, Denodo, Cloudflare, High Gear, Broadcom, NextThink.
Boost your brand with a webinar that shares comprehensive use cases, real-time product demos, and an interactive Q&A. All broadcast live to LinkedIn, YouTube, and Zoom from our Boston studio, or even on location. Fill your sales funnel with high-quality targeted leads. And contact us today by visiting solutionsreview.com/virtual events.
Yeah, I like to think about it from even a platform perspective, right? So the large enterprise today has, one possibly a tool that they're doing some basic messaging. They're doing something else with API integration. They have another tool for application integration. They've got another tool for data integration. They have a separate tool for unstructured data integration. They potentially then have a data pipeline tool. They've got their BI tool, they've got an analytics tool, and it's just this long litany of tools that are supposed to integrate things, but they're not integrated. And so the unification I see, and we were just at the Informatica conference, and IDMC is really a unification of many different data engineering tools. And historically, Informatica, they did this with a set of metadata that they call Claire now, but they bought a bunch of products, and the only way they could knit them together was metadata. And thankfully, the cloud came along, and that metadata became the foundation for actually unifying all the different pieces parts. And you have other vendors, who are trying to do that from different perspectives. You've got Boomi, who bought a data management company, structured data management company, right? To augment their API integration capabilities and their application integration capabilities. They know that they've got to bring in the data piece. And so there is definitely, as I'm seeing it, because of cloud and metadata, there is this move towards bringing all of those platforms together under a single umbrella.
Yeah, in my head, I think of that as the tool suite. And the tool suite, it can arise from really two different areas. For example, I see a lot of data teams, the user organizations. They'll go and they'll buy tools of different specialties. And if they buy those from multiple vendors, it's really hard to get those tools to work together, right? So that's a challenge. So a lot of people go the second route, which is you can go to vendors like Informatica, Talent, um, um, uh, where they provide the tool suite and the different tools for different data disciplines. they are integrated at the metadata layer, right? And increasingly at other data semantic layers, but thanks to the new thing called the data catalog. Also, just it's in the old day. I spent much of my time in data warehousing. One of the big challenges was to get your ETL tool to call the data quality tool, to make an API call out to it. So when you get tool suites from the same vendor, then API compatibility is fully assured. So that takes a lot off your plate right there, and fully optimized for performance and reliability. So there are a lot of advantages to the vendor built tool suite, as long as it's not just a bucket of tools. It has to be tools that are fully integrated and can both interoperate with each other in development as well as interoperate during deployment for production.
Hey, I want to go back a little bit and talk about automations as opposed to autonomy. And I think this is important because, in my opinion, rule-based automation will not go away. There will always be some data engineering functions that are hard-coded and do not change because of new information or because an agent or a person thinks they can change and do something differently. I gave the example of a social security number being PII, right? So there will always be automation. And so it's important, I think, for our listeners to understand what has been happening with the AI enablement of data engineering since 2018. What are some of the types, the ways that data engineering is already being automated? And maybe look at what can we expect in the future. But what's going on? What's already been automated?
Yeah, I think you're making good points here, especially around what are often called business rules. But they're not necessarily business rules. In a lot of ways, they're technology rules about how your solution should react to integrate data or improve the quality of data, et cetera. And so, in particular, it's data quality tools starting in the 1880s. I'm sorry, the 1980s. I got a little too far back
Yes.
in history there. So even going back to the 1880s, here locally in the Boston area is a company called Trillium, and it's one of the first data quality tools. And they were, the tool basically was you created data quality functions by hand coding your own business rules for data quality. So nowadays, luckily, you can buy a tool that has a lot of this stuff already pre-built. So you have objects for matching redundant records. You have objects for standardizing data. You have objects for localizing data, and so forth. But in the old days, the early data quality tools, it was a lot of programming of business rules, and as the tools got smarter and more canned stuff in them, business rules were still a way to automate some of the more common data quality functionality that you would apply in your company. Like a lot of times, the company will have to have a very particular kind of householding. There's some weird twist to the way they do householding, and they would need rules to say, no, do the householding this way in region one, but in region two, because of the way sales organizations are structured, we want to do it a different way. So you have rules that can actually sort of tweak the solutions, but also give the solutions a little more logic so that they can not just do data quality across the board in a low common denominator way, but in a more specialized way according to different needs of the business. And so you mentioned business rules won't go away. Well, I know a lot of organizations who have, KLOCs, thousands of lines of code in business rules, especially from their data quality tools. And that has a lot of work. It's a lot of engineering that went into it. And also a lot of their company's intellectual property is in those business rules. And they can't let go of those rules. Right. And this is why a lot of legacy data quality tools are going to linger because of that. That is also anything that's automated with business rules that way is also a prime candidate to be replaced with AI automation, right? Right. So business rules, it's been a blessing. It's been something that's helped a lot of people, but it's so old fashioned, and a lot of it's very manual and therefore slow, not flexible. And so, business rules have been great. hand coded like that. But it's time to move on to smarter, more flexible types of automation.
Yeah, and it's amazing to me that, as far back as 2018, we were already seeing, along with the data quality, we were seeing automated data profiling, really being able to identify structure, content, relationships, and data quality, count, a lot of attributes to really understand what was in the data. That was all automatic back then. We had some automated data preparation that was already being done on, for data that kind of is the same, stays the same. There was automated data format discovery, automated data parsing, tagging of data. I mean, all of those things existed all the way back in 2018. And so there has been this continual growth in the number of things that are being automated. But I think, like you said, these are really the areas that become the low-hanging fruit for moving forward into the world of data agents data AI agents that are able to do these kinds of things. But before we get to the agents, let's talk about Gen AI, because it wasn't that long ago, right? November 30th, 2022, when ChatGPT was released. And I think I'm going to go ahead and say the world was changed.
Oh yeah.
And it wasn't long after that some of the more advanced data engineering companies began to implement Gen AI solutions. And it wasn't a surprise, because they had already been doing AI enablement in their platforms. And so it wasn't that difficult. But from your perspective, how has generative AI impacted the world of data engineering, and what can we expect to see with Gen AI in data engineering going forward?
Yeah, I think we're going to see a lot of impact there. As kind of a background first, I would point to applications developers, not data developers, because a lot of application developers already are in the habit of depending on various types of GTP. So and their versions of these, so GTP 4.0 and 4.1 are very commonly used to generate all kinds of application code, right? And also, those generative things also have other functionality. For example, they can read your code and give you an assessment. They can find errors. They can also make suggestions for optimization. So you see what I'm saying? The applications community, they're committed. They're committed to these generative AI, especially in the forms of GDP 4 and 4.1. There's also other stuff out there. The products called Sonnet, Gemini. There's a lot of people built their own custom GTP solutions, right? There's a lot of that out there for those kind of developers. GitHub has their own version of Copilot, which has a lot of GT built behind it. So we're down that road. So application developers doing that, and so far to date, I haven't really seen a lot of data people pick up on that. And there's quite often there's a sort of sequence of events when something new comes up. Quite often it's applications that pick up that technology first, and then we data people sort of come in a couple of years later and start applying that to our field of data and analytics. So I think we're in that lag of history, that lag of evolution that's typical in the software developer world. And also, just this whole idea of generating code by a machine. Yeah, we've been doing that forever in other forms that have nothing to do with AI. For example, think of how many data integration tools and also end user stuff like reporting tools, dashboards, etc. Think how many of those generate SQL. And that's how they communicate with other tools or communicate with relational databases. They do it through SQL. A lot of times the SQL is generated by the tool, right? And even super sophisticated data engineers have got to the point where they know when to trust the generated SQL from certain tools and when to go and look at it and maybe tweak it themselves, right? So we've worked our way through the trust thing of generating SQL. And today's tools, they're sophisticated, they're automated and sophisticated enough to create dialects of SQL, like PL SQL for an Oracle database versus Transact SQL for a Microsoft database, and so forth. And a lot of tools today are also generating JavaScript and even Python, right? So we already have the precedence of depending on certain types of code generation in data management. So I think our confidence level in that kind of generation, and therefore our use of generated code using AI, I think that's definitely going to increase among data engineers.
Yeah, and I guess where I have seen it impact data engineering are the data engineering software vendors, right? Because they have all brought generative AI into their systems to give access to documentation, to create co-pilots throughout the platform so that the data engineer can actually speak with the generative AI capabilities, the co-pilot within the platform, and be able to do what they would normally do just by typing things in, to be able to do it with natural language. And ideally, so I think business users, at least tech-savvy business users, can come in and use that natural language capability. I think where it's going in the future is away from just generative. I think code generation is a great thing. But I think the name generative AI for large language models is a horrible term. It came about because the first thing we did was we generated text, we generated pictures, videos, music, code, of course. But the large language models have evolved beyond that to become more strategic, so that if you have a good LLM who understands the business and the data, you can actually ask questions about how to use data strategically. Here's my strategic plan for what I'm going to do with my data engineering program, and it's going to look like this. Will you make recommendations for my overall program? So it's going way beyond, I think, generative capabilities to become actually a strategic partner for people who are doing data engineering to make better use of their resources, to even get recommendations on how do you help the people on your team be more effective in their data engineering rules? How do you make them more effective in working with AI? So I think the impact of Gen AI is there in the data engineering world. Maybe not in terms of data code generation. I don't know. I don't follow that deeply, but I think it's there.
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of what you're talking about as well. One area I would point to, which we haven't really touched on yet, think about end user tools like Tableau, Click, Power BI. These have taken the place of the old fashioned reporting tools and dashboards. And these are the tools where a lot of business people actually get the final delivery of their data infused data products. And so for years, a lot of people, and these tools also support a fair amount of self-service, so we can have a different kind of autonomy. So the business person can be somewhat autonomous and find data and do a lot of data work without having technical people step in. And so for these kind of self-service end user tools, for a long time, the end users were saying, just we want a search kind of interface, make it look like Google or my favorite search engine. Nowadays, people are saying, I want something like ChatGPT. I want that to be my user interface. And that's where we're going at that level of the technology stack. ChatGPT, obviously driven by AI, it will become the user interface for these end user data consumption tools. Okay. And for, but you mentioned LLMs, and we hadn't had a chance to talk about that. To get that level of super bleeding edge AI driven self-service, there's got to be some killer LLMs behind it, because that's how this chat stuff works, right? This is how the GTPs work. It assumes there is some comprehensive large language model, right? That the AI can operate on. So I just want the people listening to remember that, and also remember that's actually one of the new skills for the data engineer, right? In the AI world, they have to know how to build the LLM, right? What kind of tools do you need? How is it modeled? What kind of data is in there? Also, I would say a very similar area is we haven't mentioned machine learning. There's a lot of AIs that depend on machine learning to actually parse a heck of a lot of data. And a lot of times the machine learning tool not only reads a lot of data, but it also builds a model, right? Whether it's a final model or a prototype based on what it's found in its massive scans. And so, how to work with machine learning is another data engineering tool that people are going to have to get used to. But you see what I'm saying? A lot of this end user stuff that people really want, not going to happen without the large language model, without machine learning in the middle of the technology stack.
Want more Insight Jam? Subscribe to our YouTube channel for shorts, panels, podcasts, and more. In your Shorts feed, enjoy a daily dose of best practices from tech experts and leading solution providers, while long-form panel discussions and keynotes, recorded live every quarter, go deep on important industry topics. And don't miss our collection of regular podcasts, keeping you informed on the latest trends. We're hard at work collecting the best enterprise technology information from around the globe, so subscribe to be notified of our next upload. Now, let's get back to the show.
A couple of things come to mind. By the way, I agree that the natural language interface of what we call generative AI is going to become the interface for everything. And the world of business intelligence is already coming together with data engineering, right? I mean, that's been happening for at least a decade, and even companies like Click buying Talend, right, and integrating that into a continuous data engineering to insight discovery kind of pipeline, so they have that end-to-end kind of solution. So those two worlds are coming together. The Chat GPT or the whatever, Gemini or Anthropic or whatever it is, that's what makes it possible for a data management company like Databricks to suddenly have a business intelligence offering, because the natural language interface is the interface. It's not dashboards anymore, right? That's what enables it. So I mean, there is a merging of all of those technologies together because of generative AI.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny, generative AI, it's got to have some massive source to generate from. Also, I would just throw out there for folks who are trying to learn large language models, also keep an eye out for the upcoming small language models, because a lot of these large language, they're hundreds of terabytes and sometimes outrageous sizes and stuff, which makes it hard to build, but also it's hard to scan. So there's a performance problem that come with these large language models. So there are some really smart people out there working on small language models. How to, especially if you want to have analytics or some chat user interface that's about a very specific business domain. There's no reason why you'd have a multi-domain gigantic LLM. You could have a more specific business domain and therefore a smaller model. So modeling these kind of things, it is starting to be on the plate of the data engineer. So keep an eye out for the small models. That's what you really want in the long run.
I mean, if you think about it, the data engineering field itself has its own small language model. It's the language that we use to talk about data, and it's very specific to what a data engineer does, and that becomes the IP and the domain of these data engineering companies to be able to turn that not just into the application that they own, but to release that, whether it's through MCP or A to A, whatever it is, to be able to release that as accessible to business users and to combine it with the business metadata, right? So the semantic layer, so that suddenly the small language model for a specific business understands the small language model of data, and suddenly the whole world of data is open to people who aren't data engineers. So I think that whole thing happening is pretty exciting to me, which brings us to, and I did save, in my opinion, the best for last, the agentification of data engineering, because data agents, AI agents are here. And every event that we've been at recently, or every announcement that's come out recently, includes agents of some kind. And these are these agents do have the capability of acting autonomously. They tend to be very task oriented, not yet to person or work group or ecosystem, very task oriented, but nevertheless, they're acting autonomously. So how do you see AI agents impacting the world of data engineering today?
Well, we're in very early days. So far in terms of users actually using, agentic AI specifically for data engineering, uh, I know people who are trying it out, doing some prototyping, thinking about it as future steps. I've talked to people who say, well, we went through that process. We know we have to have agentic AI. It's just there's certain barriers to it. One of the barriers is I think one of the assumptions here is that what you want in the long term is you want a vendor who has a tool that has an architecture that's appropriate to lots of AI agents doing data engineering tasks. So that's kind of a big assumption. Vendors aren't there. Also, you need a vendor who's got an architecture so that when you deploy a data management solution that's going to find data, integrate it, and then supply it to different parts of the business, then you need an architecture that can make many different agents do a coordinated effort, right? How you
Yeah.
gonna make this stuff? How you gonna make 1,000 agents work together?
Yeah.
And again, the vendors aren't there with that architecture. And eventually, some users are going to want to create their own agents. But I think a lot of times for really the kind of the commonplace stuff like these data quality functions we talked about, ETL functions, a lot of the metadata creation and management we've talked, agents for that kind of stuff that was be so commonly used. The vendor should just provide canned agents for that, and you can customize them if you want. And but I think eventually people are going to want a vendor with a large library of canned agents, right? And the vendors aren't there as what either. So see what I'm saying? I think the current state of data engineering tooling it's still quite nascent when it comes to supporting AI agents. What do you think of that?
It feels a little closer to me, but I think that you're right from a user perspective. The key vendors are releasing and announcing their agents, and people are trying them out. Some are
Probably.
making it into production, and I think a lot of people are waiting. So I think you're right. We're early. We're early, but it's coming fast. It's coming as fast as I believe Gen AI did. Surprised us all, right? At the speed
Mhm.
at which that moved. I think the same is going to be true of AI agents. They're gonna come on pretty quickly, and that, of course, brings up the topic of the data engineer, right? So, I mean, what's going to happen with the data engineer, Philip? Are they going to all lose their jobs? Will we live in a world where there's no more data engineers? They don't exist anymore. What's going to happen to them?
Yeah, the uh, uh, one of the ironies is that some of the early people who were trying to work on artificial intelligence in the 1950s were actually corporate efficiency experts, and they needed thinking machines that could help them quantify worker productivity so that they could study it and improve efficiencies within big corporations. So it's kind of funny that AI had that possible use in the earliest of days. So now AI it's gonna help all kinds of people, including the data engineer, with some productivity issues. And that's the thing. If you take somebody's job and you make somebody more productive in it, they typically don't lose the job. They just are able to do more projects, right? Since each project takes less time, they can do more projects. So they end up doing more quality products that they deliver to their internal customer. Uh, and that's how IT works, isn't it, right? We're
Yeah, yeah.
producing solutions for an internal customer. And there was also one of these efficiency experts wrote a book called The Mythic Man Month. And it busted the myth that if you want to develop software faster, you just throw more software developers at it. And studies showed, and this was an IBM project, right? The book came out of there. So the study showed that when you double the number of software engineers on a software project, it's going to take twice as long because of the overhead of getting that many people to actually communicate and collaborate, and then to do all the unit testing and the folding together routines that make software development really slow. So I think the kind of the common wisdom is that if you want to speed up software engineers, in our case, data engineers, then you give them whatever it takes so that they can finish a given project faster and pretty much by themselves, right? As opposed to working on gigantic engineering teams and stuff. So I think the additional productivity lift from different forms of AI is going to help a lot of engineers, create the projects faster, and then that they'll be creating a larger number of projects. And once they do that, then they're even more valuable employees. See what I'm saying?
Yeah,
And so
I
they
agree with you.
will have job security.
Yeah, I agree absolutely. The job descriptions may go away. I mean, I've heard the statistic that more than 50% of the jobs that exist today didn't exist in 1940, right? So there will be creation of new types of jobs, and in the meantime, the AI can operate as an assistant to somebody, making them more productive, or as an extension, doing, taking phone calls that they would have to take, taking emails that they would have to take, and automating the response where it's possible. All of that, right? So I think that in the future there will be a place for people, and more needed than ever before. I recently read the book by Jeff Woods, The AI-Driven Leader, and he talks about how in the Industrial Revolution, the educational system was developed by Carnegie to pump out people who didn't think but just did whatever they were told. And so they sat them in rows in the classroom, and they had them to check boxes on a test. And if they could get them to do that, they knew that they would go into the factory and do what they told. And that was the whole system was designed to be able to create people like that. And I think that because of the strategic use of AI, this is an opportunity. I agree with Jeff Woods. This is an opportunity to be able to get back our dignity and get back to more creative kinds of work, to get back to critical thinking. So I think there's an opportunity here for the workforce to grow in ways that they've never grown before. Well, Philip, our time is up. I really appreciate you coming and joining me here. Thank you for joining the Digital Analyst. We're going to have to do this again sometime.
Well, John, it's been a real pleasure. I'll always have to do anything with you. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for joining, everyone. Bye now. Thank you for joining the Digital Analyst podcast. If you enjoyed what you heard today, do me a favor and like and subscribe right down below. The Insight Jam YouTube channel has hundreds of solid content, solid videos. You'll enjoy it. There's over 850,000 followers. You can join that community. If you're interested in contacting me, best way to connect on LinkedIn. Let's start a conversation. I would love to talk more about agentic AI, Gen AI, all the AI stuff. You can also find me at ferraroconsulting.com. For Philip Russom, best way to connect with him is going to be also on LinkedIn. Philip has a wealth of information. I know you'll enjoy it. Hey, look forward to seeing you back here again in a couple of weeks for the Digital Analyst.
Powered by Insight Jam.